2024 has proven to be something of a vintage year for Wolverine fans. It is of course a big anniversary birthday for the character, he's had a hit film in the cinemas, and he's had a lot of toys. And here's one that I've been a little bit slow to catch up on and finally review. This figure came out around about the summertime, but I finally managed to get my hands on one and get round to doing a review for you today. And this is of course yet another Wolverine variant, but this time as he was presented in the Astonishing X-Men run as drawn by John Cassaday. And whilst we seem to have a near endless deluge of variants of Wolverine and reissues and re-releases and tweaks on various costumes and looks for the character this year, I do think that this is warranted. This is a long overdue version of this particular costume. The last time we had this version of Wolverine was actually in the Toy Biz years, and although it was a nice figure for the time, by today's standards, it does look, well, a little thin, a little scrawny, a little off-brand, you might say. So if we take a look at the packaging, you'll immediately notice that this is a little bit different to our typical Marvel Legends offering that we tend to get in the standard waves. The packaging is a square box. It's actually quite a small box as well. It's quite compact, which is good. In terms of the design, it's actually mirroring what we saw in the Danny Ketch Ghost Rider Deluxe set that we got recently, which is quite interesting. So this isn't specific to Wolverine. It is celebrating 85 years of Marvel. You'd think they would have done something around the celebration of Wolverine instead for this, but I guess not. It's not got an awful lot going on it. Again, a lot of black borders, which you'll know I tend to criticise in a lot of other toy lines as well. It's not specific to this brand, of course. But we do have that window displayed there, and we can see, obviously, the character and all of his bits and pieces, which is, pretty displayable. The best thing about the packaging, though, I have to say, is actually the side panel. I think they've made really good use of this very small space, actually, but actually representing an image from John Cassaday's version of the character when he was on the title, which looks really good. It's largely text-free as well, so you can put this on your shelf and it'll look pretty nice. And then if we flip it, we have this fantastic, big image from John Cassaday's artwork, which is absolutely fantastic, and then it's just some small print. But I like this. This largely speaks for itself. This is actually kind of displayable, I think, because it's just big enough to make an impact, and it looks pretty good. Moving on to the figure, I have to say, when I saw some initial photos, and indeed when I first opened them up, there's something that looks slightly off with the proportions. I'm not sure whether it's the shoulder pads or what, but something looks slightly unusual about this figure, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we start off by looking at this head sculpt, though, I think they've done a pretty decent job. We've had a number of Logan heads across the years. I think this might be new. I mean, we've had so many this year, but I think this is actually yet another head sculpt for Logan, which is pretty good. I think they've done a decent job. It's not my favourite. I don't think it's the best by any stretch of the imagination, but I think they've done a good job here, and the paint tab seems to be pretty apt, although it would have been nice seeing a little bit more of a wash running through the hair. Now, the sculpting on the body is pretty good. I think this works pretty well for the most part. What's really striking about this figure, though, is the use of paints, just how bright and vivid these blues and yellows are. Like, it's wow, like it almost assaults your eyes. But it's really good. I really like that. I think that works really, really quite well. And yeah, overall, its presentation is pretty sharp. I like a lot of the details on the gauntlets and on the boots, as we'll see a little bit later, and the belt as well. I think this all looks really nicely in proportion and, looks accurately coloured. You never know which way they're going to go when it comes to the claws. This time they've opted for the individual claws that are sort of pegged in to his fists. This works pretty well. Mine, thankfully, are pretty decent in terms of the spacing between them. Nothing's got particularly warped in the packaging. One of them was a little bit loose. I did notice it was kind of working its way out there, so that's something you might want to keep an eye on. One thing to mention, though, what I do think is really, really good. They always do a good job with this, but it's nice that we actually have the individual paint job there on his arms to represent his hairy arms. So it is nice to see those paint apps. I think they've done a good job here. It's something they usually do quite well with Wolverine figures, but I have to say the detailing here is particularly impressive. It looks really, really good, this, like proper pro stuff. And as near as I can tell, the boots look to be a new sculpt as well. I don't think we've seen these boots before. This definitely looks new, which is great. Nice to really see that the detail on the side there, those yellow strips are actually sculpted in, not just painted on as well, which is really good. Likewise, the strip down the middle there. So this is a new bit of tooling, and I think this works really very nicely. Looking at articulation, he does have a ball joint at the top of the head there, so he can spin his head all the way around. And of course, he can wobble it left and right as well, which is very pleasing to see. He can also bend his head forwards and backwards, which is great. It's not a huge range of motion, but it's it's sufficient to the task thereof. He does have a fantastic butterfly wing joint there, really needed for Wolverine figures, I think. So this works really very well. He then has the ball joint in the shoulder, of course the standard bicep swivel there as well, and the double joint at the elbow, which is great. So really healthy range of motion here. I think this looks really good. He's got the standard pin swivel, of course, at the wrist there, so the handle will rotate all the way around and it will hinge forwards and backwards, although as ever you have to be careful with those claws. There's 2 points of articulation in the torso. There's a ball joint in the upper torso and there's an ab crunch in the waist as well. That means, of course, he can spin from side to side. He can lean left and right a healthy distance as well. And of course, it also means that he can bend forwards and backwards, although not quite as much as I was expecting, given that he has 2 points here. Maybe I'm just not being forceful enough, but I thought you might get a little bit more out of that. It's got the ball joints in the hips, of course, so the legs will kick out to the side. There's the thigh swivel at the top there as well, means the legs can kick forwards, they can go backwards a little bit, and there's a double joint at the knee as well. And then finally we have the ankle rocker, of course, so that foot will hinge forwards and backwards, and it will also pivot from side to side. Moving on to the accessories, well, he comes with an additional 2 sets of hands, 2 closed fists, 1 pointing finger and 1 open palm hand, which is kind of cool. Not really seen this on Wolverine figures in the past, which is great. And of course he has an alternate masked, very angry head, which is very cool to see. And I have to say, despite not having a huge array of extras here, there's actually a lot to keep you quite entertained in terms of creating lots of different looks for this figure, which is really, really quite impressive. I have to say, one of the things I really love about this figure is that pointing hand. That feels like you could do an awful lot with. That is, like I said, a little bit different for Wolverine. I don't think we've ever had a pointing hand with a Wolverine figure before, and it's really surprisingly effective. You can imagine this version of Wolverine having a few words with Cyclops or the White Queen that we got a couple of years ago from this same Astonishing X-Men line, which is pretty cool. All in all, I think there's a lot of fun different elements here, and I think, as I said, you can create a lot of different looks to this character. I also really like this alternate head, the masked head. I think that it works an absolute treat, and yeah, there's lots of fun things you can do with this figure. It feels like there's such a lot of posability in terms of the articulation, combined with some great accessories to really make him, very versatile and dynamic, I suppose. So for me, I'm gonna give this figure the full 5 stars. Actually, I really, really like it. There's something really impressive about it. I love how bright and colourful it is. I love the articulation. I think the paint apps that we have are really good, especially on the arms there. I think they're fantastic, actually. I really like the accessories, and like I said, his posability is brilliant. There's so many fun things you can do with him. He's one of the standouts in a year where we've had a number of great Wolverine figures. This is one of the top ones, I think, for me. I'm really, really pleased I got him. I was on the fence whether to pick him up or not, and I'm really glad that I did. There's nothing really to complain about with this figure. There's something somewhere in the back of my mind when I look at him that there's something feels a little bit off. I can't put my finger on it. It might be that perhaps the muscles in his arms or in his torso are a little bit too big for the character, especially with the smaller head. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to pin it down. Something looks ever so slightly off, but I can't really articulate what it is. But I'm not going to hold that against it, because I think this is an absolutely fantastic figure. As I said, in a year of great Wolverine figures, this is definitely one of the strongest ones, and I think it deserves its full 5 stars. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.